up to date on the buffer requirements on the 404 solar project, Lowen Farms, Y Mills Farms. We refer to it commonly as the 404 project. As you remember, Mr. Drummond and I have been for quite some time, well over a year, trying to bring that site into compliance. Tesla Corporation now owns that solar facility. I've met numerous times on the site with a representative from Tesla. We had worked out an arrangement where the buffer was to be reestablished in the spring of 2019. They did not fulfill that obligation. We met in the spring, and we made a second arrangement to have the buffer installed in the fall of 2019. That did not happen again. So I really had no other choice but to engage Mr. Drummond to have him contact their representative to try to move this forward to get it complete, which Mr. Drummond has done so and has reached out to their council, and we now hopefully have an agreement where the buffer will be established in the spring of 2020. Mr. Drummond met with their representative yesterday, and we talked about what...
You did?
I did.
Yeah.
I'm just letting you know
okay.
what needs to be done in order to fulfill that obligation, and I'm crafting a email to Mr. Drummond laying out the parameters upon which that will occur.
Are you going to get anything done by the end of the month?
Yes, this fall they as the board knows, that solar project has a really difficult history. At that time, when that solar project was approved in 2015, all a developer needed was concept plan approval, minimal landscaping, and it really wasn't highly regulated as it is now with our new ordinance. So as you probably remember, the topsoil was stripped off that site, which they should not have done, and it created issues with drainage along the perimeter of the project. So this fall, what they're going to do in the next month, there's 4 major areas where water is lying, and because water is lying there, it's prohibiting the plants to grow, and that's why a lot of that buffer area is dead. So what they're going to do this fall is they're going to regrade those areas, put in some berming, put in some good topsoil, so that in the spring we can go in and have the landscaping reinstalled. And really, it makes a lot of sense, because I would not want them to put plant material there now, because it'll just die. So they need to remediate the problem areas, which they've agreed to do this fall. So hopefully, we will not have to engage any further.
Another aspect of the agreement is that the Tesla will be posting a surety by way of cash, a letter of credit, or a bond in the amount. They haven't signed this yet, but they've indicated by email that they'll agree to their lawyer in California 120% of the value of the work, because the landscape bond, such that it was 4 years ago, is expired.
What's the duration of the bond?
Well, it'll be we'll make sure that it's for what is it, 2 growing seasons? Right. 2 growing seasons.
And they will be required to sign a landscape maintenance agreement for the buffer as well, which would be part of that. Two years.
Because in this sort of climate change era we're living in, we run into really dry weeks, and they're going to have to pay someone to water those plants. But if they have a bond, I'm sure they'll figure it out and buy watering with the landscaping.
So the good news is we're getting there, not as quickly as we had anticipated or they had agreed to, but we're getting there. And I appreciate Chris's involvement, because I think that really went a long way to getting their attention.
We threatened to sue them and close them down. That got their attention when I said we were going to seek a preliminary injunction to shut it down for being out of compliance with the conditional use approval. Oh, you can't do that. I said, well, we can.
And the last item, just to save time towards the end of the day, because I know we have quite an agenda. We did pass out to everyone the projects list. It's rather lengthy. It's 9 pages. Hopefully, it paints a picture of each application that either is before us or is pending or has recently been approved in a status update. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or Rob or Brennan. Rob and Brennan are the folks in the office that deal with these projects on a daily basis, so they would know much more than I about the particulars of a certain project. But if you have any questions, please let us know, and we'll fill you in.
I find it very helpful, Mike. Thank you for doing that. And when will it be updated? I mean,
Whenever you would, I update it, I try to update it monthly internally so I can track these projects. I can bring that information to you whenever you'd like me to.
say every couple of months or so,
Sure.
we probably should update it at least once a quarter.
Sure. Be happy to do that.
I find it very helpful to go back and review what's been approved and what's under construction.
Right.
And
Right.
Mr. Priest, the ultimate goal is to actually get it on the QAC property viewer map. We'll talk to our GIS guys, and they can keep a running tally, and just a numbered list where you'll be able to click on it and find out some information. We've been extremely busy, so that has fallen to the back burner, but that's the ultimate goal. So
that would be helpful.
hopefully, as we start to slow down, we can pick back up with that.
Yeah, I suggest before it gets all online that you basically email us a copy.
So you'll be able to look real time.
What's it before, you can set that up, being that sounds like it might be
Yeah,
a
so
few
we
months off.
did one that had a map. It was very cumbersome to do because as projects came in, we tried to update it
Right.
weekly. Well, we based it on geography. So those on Kent Island started at number 1, those in the North County ended with number 33 or something. Well, inevitably, a project would come in the middle and need to be number 13. So then everything would have to be renumbered and resituated, and it became cumbersome. So we're going to get it so that it's online and anybody can look at it.
Perfect, I just meant that until it gets online, just email, a copy of the list.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next on the agenda is concept plan SP 19-04-0023, Morris Solar, FFP MD Centerville Project 1, Forefront Power. Mr. Gunther?
Got it. So we go from talking about the less than stellar solar project that Mike mentioned to hopefully what these ladies hope to be will be a much better product. They're proposing what turns out to be a utility scale solar, even though it's small, project directly adjacent to the county solar field out off of Safety Drive. Today, they're seeking concept plan approval and a favorable recommendation to the Board of Appeals for their conditional use. This is just an update of our local process for utility scale solars. We are currently in step 2. They will be able to proceed to step 3 with your recommendation and concept plan approval. They will come, once they achieve conditional use, they will then have to come back to you with a formal site plan for your review, citizen review and comment one more time. And once that gets approved, they can proceed to permitting. So here we are in the county. If you take the road right out here, go across the new overpass, less than a mile down the road on the left is where we're talking about. So here we are, kind of off the screen. Here's the overpass. This is Ruthsburg Road. This is the county solar site, and this is the 88-acre farm. And you can see I've overlaid the site plan on top of here. This is not to scale, so, but you can see it sits in the back of the property. Unlike the last solar project you reviewed, which was 300-plus acres, this one is 4.23 actual array area. Total limit of disturbance is just under 11 acres. And even though this is small, it falls into the utility scale because they're selling the power. So once they sell the power and it's no longer an accessory use to the farm, it kicks them into this process. The property is zoned ag. It is within our utility scale solar overlay district. And this is just another map showing that anything in the yellow is within that district. There is no conservation land on the property. There are some environmental features. There's woodlands, there's wetlands, neither of which are proposed for any sort of disturbance. There is sensitive species review area, so as they progress through the site plan process, they'll have to reach out to the Maryland Department of Natural Resources to determine what, if anything, endangered or threatened is on this site. And they proposed forest retention to meet their forest conservation requirements. So this is the concept plan. You can see it's cut off here. This inset is actually the site entrance. They're permitted 35 acres of impervious surface. They're proposing a little over 1.5. No proposed floor area. The noise will be below the requirements at the property lines. The FAA determined there was no hazard. Maryland Historical Trust has said there's no historical properties in the area of potential effect, and they're not proposing any lighting on the site. So a couple features. We have a small laydown area. It's a small project. You can see the brown line is currently an access to the field. This will be an improved access so that the construction vehicles can get back there. They're going to run underground, which is required, underground utility line out all the way down to the road where it's going to poke up and go across to the existing utility lines. And unlike those big solar projects where citizens of Queen Anne's County may not be able to get power from that, we will be able to generate and buy power from this project. And I'll let them explain how that works because I'm not really sure. But people in the area will be able to purchase power from this should it be cheaper and they want to. The panels themselves are proposed at 9 feet 6 inches, which is about a foot taller than anything we've seen so far. They're proposing an 8-foot black or green vinyl coated fence. Here you can see the detail for the transformer, roughly 8 feet 2 inches high. Stormwater is being addressed on site. DPW has and will continue to review this through the process. At this point, they're proposing vegetated swales underneath the panels and vegetated filter strips along the driveway access area, you can see. And this isn't on both sides because this is currently wooded. There's a hedgerow that's right there. Landscaping, they're required just like all utility scale, 50 feet all the way around the site unless there's established vegetation. They are providing that. And back here, this is the wooded area, so there's no requirement back here because this is going to remain. Even a 6-acre fenced area, you can see is a substantial amount of vegetation. So these are pictures of the site. I took these early in the year prior to planting, obviously. What you can't really tell from this picture is I'm standing at about, or I'm parked on the side of the road, at about elevation 60. There's a rise right along here, and you don't really see it through these pictures, but it's roughly between 80 and 85. So there's a 20 to 25 foot elevation jump back here. And this one really doesn't show it, but it's really visible if you stop right here on the side of the road, because this is the highest spot. So what I did is I had our GIS guys provide me a LiDAR map, which obviously will color code your elevation so you can visually see it. It's not a 3D image, obviously, but you can see this white area is the highest point of the property, and it drops off on both sides. So I took those pictures roughly here at elevation 60. This little donut right here is 85. This line is 80. So roughly 20 to 25-ish feet between where the cars will be driving by and the highest point on the site. So then I overlaid the site plan on it to give you an idea that the solar panels themselves and all the equipment are going to be on the back side of the downward slope. So visibility from the road, even without vegetation in the required buffer, is likely to be minimal. But then when you plant the 6-foot trees in front of it, it should really screen this well. So that is all I have. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to the applicant to give you some details about themselves, the project, and how we purchase power from this thing.
I'm Kelsey Crane. I work for Forefront Power. A little bit about this project and where it falls it's in the Maryland Community Solar Program, which means that the power from this will be provided to Delmarva residents. So it's not just Queen Anne's County, but anyone who gets Delmarva power. And they will be offered at a discount of some percent. So anyone who subscribes to this is guaranteed a discount to their current solar. Forefront has 6 projects currently either constructed or to be completed by the end of the year in Maryland in the Community Solar Program, which is, we think, the largest portfolio so far in the program. So we're pretty proud of that. Just some, a couple items I think that we commonly see people concerned about with solar. One is the height, which we talked about, is 9.5 feet at the very top, and that's just 3 feet off the ground plus about 6 feet of panels, give or take how far that post goes in the ground. I did hear, we were sitting here listening to the vegetation comment. We have the vegetative buffer, and we would also be willing to do a letter of credit or a bond for 2 or 3 seasons. That's very typical. We're doing that with another project down the shore. And then, as you saw on the plans, we have the fire access. Just the regular access, but it's going to be up to code for fire departments. We know that's a big concern for first responder safety, local safety. So that will be up to code for all that, and there'll be access if needed. We're going to be connecting to, hopefully, it's up to Delmarva, but as of now, our plan is to connect to the pole across the street, and then they'll have their equipment right near the road, and then we'll run underground to our project. That's both for visual, we don't want to have a eyesore as much as possible, and then also the landowner is planning on farming the rest of this project, so we want him to have as much farmland as possible with this project being set back, which was kind of another reason why we set it so far back, so that he can utilize his property still. Just a quick rundown of that. I'll open it up to questions.
I got a postcard in the mail about 3 weeks ago from something called Arcadia Power,
We work with them.
and it said I could save 10%. Is that what this kind of thing is?
That's the Arcadia Power is our community solar partner. So rather than
They're like from New England or something.
they have an office in DC. So I don't know if they have a New England office too. Maybe that's where they're like our corporate is in San Francisco.
What is Arcadia Power? They like your marketing side or something?
So
or-
no, they're their own company, but we work with them to acquire customers. And like any of you got the postcard, then they manage the billing and customer concerns. So rather,
If I said okay to Arcadia Power, would I be getting, I don't get electrons from that, right?
you won't get the exact electrons. I kind of see it as if we have a bathtub of electrons in the system. The rule is if we're pouring in a cup of electrons, we have to show a group. We have to fully subscribe those out. So, you're not getting it directly from this, but you're getting a discount and you're supporting community solar.
To further that,
Who gets the money? That's what I've never understood.
So
Somebody's making money here, and I'm always,
well, the way it normally works, if I may, is I think the very basics are the Public Service Commission has a website that lists all available alternative electrical suppliers and it's done by zip code. So basically, you could sign up for one of these suppliers. Delmarva will send it to you, and then the Delmarva bill, there's one bill for actually using their wires. They charge you so much for it. Then the other is whatever this alternative electric supply company wants to charge you per kilowatt hour.
does Delmarva make any money on this, or are they
No,
just?
so
they're just-
they're still getting
we're
their
paying for
same.
you, for the electrons, your electrons going through their wires?
Yeah, they're still getting, say you pay 10 cents a kilowatt hour, 15 cents. They're still getting that, but we're selling the power at a lower rate because solar is becoming less and less expensive, so we're able to offer energy at a lower rate than some of the traditional energy.
What do you say is a lower rate? I mean, I'm buying power like for 7 cents a kilowatt hour or
So
something.
you'd get a 10% discount on that.
No, I'm buying it just, off of someone off that website, but you're saying that what you sell would be 7 cents a kilowatt hour or lower?
So it would be the total of all you have your supply charge, your transmission and distribution. So they would look at that and then give you a 10% off. So you wouldn't have that same supplier, you'd change it to Arcadia Power.
Oh, I understand that, but I'm just trying to get an idea, because when you sign up for someone, you're signing up and signing a contract to buy it for so much kilowatt hour for a certain term, 6 months, 12 months, 18, 24 months. But it's a specified kilowatt hour separately, and then Delmarva charges you separately for using their transmission lines.
Yeah, so I believe this is consolidated, so then you get the discount of that. So we don't say you're always gonna pay 8 cents a kilowatt hour, or you're always gonna pay 10
You're
cents.
gonna pay a whole lot more, because Delmarva is gonna charge you a healthy number for their transmission lines.
So they charge you the same amount no matter what, the
Right,
transmission
but
and
it adds,
distribution.
it adds up.
Yeah, so then this is just guaranteeing that what you're paying now is 10% less, or 5%, or.
The whole bundle of charges goes down by 10%.
Yeah, and then,
It doesn't make any sense,
I think
really,
it-
what you're saying, because
No, I think
when
she's
you
saying the whole
buy it, you have to sign up and sign a contract for so much a kilowatt hour.
yeah, but this is you're signing up for a discounted rate. So the contract is a little different. I mean, I can have someone from Arcadia.
And we're just curious.
Yeah. So yeah, the reason it works out is because Forefront is able to make, or you're able to, the community solar program allows companies to get full retail rate, which is all the supply charge, the distribution, and the transmission. So with that rate, we pass on discounts because that rate is allowing us to make some money, but then we pass on the discounts so people can go green and save money.
Gotta be, the federal tax credits have gotta be buried in here somewhere. And
Oh, yeah, ITC is there. I'm saying, but that's what, that's the mechanism that Maryland allowed, why this program works is because through the community solar program, you get the rate and then we offer the discount.
I was like, Delmarva has to take it on the chin a bit.
Yeah, it just doesn't quite make sense.
Pay for, we
It
pay
sounds
for
like a
upgrades.
Public policy that's it's supposed to help us, well, sort of
We don't
trimming everybody
We
else a
don't
little
have to
bit.
offer a discount, but then no one would buy it.
But you can probably because of the federal tax credits. Probably. It's
So-
just interesting, that's all.
Yeah.
We don't understand how it works, and we're trying to understand how it works.
And I'd be interested in buying something if it was really a discounted price.
Yeah, and then also it's kind of going away from the concept plan, but the contracts, I know a lot of people are worried, about signing long contracts. There's contracts that are, month to month, a year, 2 years, so there's different, and with those you get different
But
discounts.
one thing that troubled me when I got this Arcadia Power thing was that, so I sign up, and you would like to think that you were getting the electrons from a community system in your quote-unquote community, but that's not what happens. We could be getting, electrons, so to speak, from a community solar
You get it
plant
anywhere
in
on the grid.
Wisconsin.
Yeah,
No, with this one, you have to get it from a Delmarva project. So the Arcadia Power, unless they're working with another company, they don't tell us who else they work with. We have a project that is about to about to be energized in Snow Hill, Maryland. So that might be the Arcadia Power that you're getting. So it has to be a project within
see.
Delmarva.
Okay.
I have a question. First, I want to commend you on your proposal. It's the best solar proposal in terms of completeness and understandability that I've seen since I've been on the commission. But I did have a question about an inconsistency, and that is the life expectancy in the proposal is 30 years. And in the decommissioning report, the life expectancy is 25 years.
Yeah,
And
we
the
can-
assurance that you offer is based on the 25-year life expectancy. And I'm wondering whether the assurance is sufficient. You estimate in the decommissioning report, I think, a 2.5% annual interest rate. So I'm wondering whether the assurance for 25 years is actually sufficient for the project, which in your proposal you estimate to be a 30-year.
Yeah, we can increase it to 30 years. That might have just been a mistake because some of our projects only last 25 years. So we'll increase that, pull that out, add the 2% each year, and change that number.
So you have solar arrays across the United States?
Yeah. I work mostly in Maryland and New York, but our company does.
Okay. Have you done any solar array studies as they affect migratory bird patterns?
We haven't, our company has not. I know that there have been some very large projects that have had some bad history of being right in the migratory bird path, and they're so big they think it's water. I think I've only read one case of that, but we do studies based on the location of making sure that this isn't a habitat for migratory birds, or that because we're not cutting down any trees, so we keep it really local.
Any other questions of the applicant?
I do, Mr. Chairman. The legend on, I'm looking on page, or sheet C101, and the stippling of the ground beneath your arrays is labeled as a vegetative filter strip. And in Mr. Gunter's report, it had sort of two green arrows. Are they actually swale strips, or is the entirety of the land beneath the strip? Yeah, there. Is that just water sheet flow direction, or are there actual swales of concentrated flow? The fact that it's called a strip, I'm just curious as to the nomenclature.
There are details in the plan for a vegetated swale.
They have to be a swale because the contours are going like
I
that.
just don't see it on 101. What page are you on, Rob?
If you go to C102, I think it shows the swales
Ah,
running, yeah.
there they are. Okay. So the rest of that stippling is what species? There's grasses,
Yeah.
turf grass, or
We're open. I think we usually just use a native grass seed mix. But some areas have, one
Sure, well,
person asks
the,
us for blue clover, white clover.
we have had in the past solar projects come to us, work with our soil conservation district, and the district has been recommending pollinator species. While you're there, why not planting something other than turf or general grasses, something more beneficial to habitat? I would certainly reach out with them, and the district also has guidance on order of operations with respect to planting and establishing that stabilization, where many companies, or at least many of the ones that are coming in recently, have come in, stabilize the site with that pollinator mix species prior to construction laydown, and then sort of requiring or requesting of the contractors to tiptoe around the site rather than trying to establish those pollinator species under the panels once they're built. So I would request, please, that you at least work with the Soil Conservation District in the county, as they have had, certainly in recent history, exposure and experience with that kind of project build-out.
Sorry. Yeah, that's definitely something we do. We actually have a couple projects in New York that are part of a pilot program with Cornell with pollinator friendly, so we're
Great.
familiar with that. And we don't plant before.
Well,
Yeah,
that's, I'm not
Yeah, no, yeah, so that's something we're
suggesting that, but
familiar.
the Soil Conservation District, because other larger facilities, right, this is obviously relatively small in the utility scale, have treated differently, and either way, it may likely be just the establishment of the site helps, because you're not then sort of sprinkling seed underneath the already established and compacted grounds. But I would certainly suggest, and at least put before you now, before you come back to us however many months from now for the site plan approval, to contact the SCD and work with them on vegetative species for underneath that panel.
Sounds great.
And the second question, if I may, could you help clarify why it's a 4.2 acre solar array, yet there's 11 or 12 acres of disturbance?
I believe that we are including the access road update and the vegetation.
The vegetative stuff, okay. It just seems,
Yeah, because that's also, we're releasing a little more too, so that matches up with our total disturbance of what we're using and the laydown area.
right. And there's, on the plans, there's an 8-foot, you can see it actually in the map that Rob just pulled up. There's an 8-foot drive path around the outside. It's actually beyond the limit of disturbance, and then it sort of turns around, goes back behind between your project and the woods. Is that Mr. Morris's?
For access, yeah.
So, okay.
So that if he wants to use that,
That will be
forest.
outside of your security fencing and such? So that's just to get him access to his property around that?
Yeah.
Roger that. Thank you. So that's already existing?
I believe it's just, I mean, I think there's like, you know, where you drive a truck for over and
Sure.
over again.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of the level existing.
Farm lane? Access?
Not, no gravel.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's for the logging trucks.
Not funny.
Funny, but not.
Yeah.
Just a curiosity question. You have a large parcel there. You're building a rather small array. It looks like it's a phase one of a larger project where you,
Yeah, I can explain the size. So we went through a study with Delmarva, and this was the amount of capacity that this line could hold. So we went in with a 2-megawatt proposal, which is what we do in the community solar, that's the most, and they came back and gave us this number. We won't be coming,
so basically Delmarva's infrastructure is limiting the size of your solar arrays.
yeah, I believe they upgraded the line recently, so they might be able to hold more, but this is our proposal. This is where, if we were to do a phase 2, we would have to go through the community solar program through you guys again. But, yeah,
Yeah, it just looks like you got a lot of open field and it's a
yeah.
a easy place to build more collectors.
Not saying no, like Hillary Clinton. I never, 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 never say never.
Are there any other questions of the applicant? All right, thank you very much. This time we will take any public comment. Public comment is now closed.
I make a motion then to.
Okay, so we have two motions that need to happen. For resolution, we need the concept plan and then a separate motion for recommendation to Board of Appeals.
I'll make a motion to approve the concept plan and the recommendation to the Board of Appeals,
Favorable recommendation.
a favorable recommendation.
Okay, so would you like to read out the resolution, or?
Okay. Concept plan. Resolved that the Planning Commission regarding the request by FFP MD Centerville Project 1 LLC for concept plan approval to construct a 4.23 acre, 700 kilowatt solar array with an approximate 88.89 acre parcel as more particularly described in Planning and Zoning File SP 19-04-0023 hereby finds and hereby grants concept plan approval.
I have a motion, is there a second?
Second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None, passed unanimously. Now entertain the motion for favorable or unfavorable recommendation to the Board of Appeals.
Recommendation to the Board of Appeals, resolved that the Planning Commission regarding the request by FFP MD Centerville Project 1 LLC for a favorable recommendation to the Board of Appeals to construct a 4.23 acre, 700 kilowatt solar array with an approximate 88.89 acre parcel, which is conditional use in the AG zoning district and is more particularly described in Planning and Zoning File SP 19-040023, hereby finds favorable recommendations to the Board of Appeals subject to the following conditions. 1, if by the time of construction the panels proposed have changed from that provided in the plans, updated information must be submitted. 2, applicant must notify P&Z when ownership of the solar array changes. 3, prior to final site plan approval, provide the finalized forest conservation plan and protection documents. 4, provide an assessment from the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, Wildlife, and Heritage Service for potential impacts, rare, threatened, and potential impacts of rare, threatened, and endangered species. 5, prior to final site plan approval, provide an automatically renewable decommissioning bond that is enforceable by the county. 6, prior to final site plan approval, provide an automatically renewable landscape surety and maintenance agreement. 7, provide documentation that provide documentation of the connection to the public utility is approved. 8, provide a finalized decommissioning plan that addresses all the requirements provided in 18 :1-95 period S period sub 5E. Any outstanding comments stemming from agency reviews are addressed during Board of Appeals submittal.
Second.
Favorable recommendation with the second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none? You're all set, ladies. Thank you. Next on the agenda is major site plan SP 19-08-0031, Chester Storage LLC, proposing an 11,150 square foot expansion of an existing self-storage facility. Mr. Gunther, the floor is yours.
Floor's mine again. All right. Sorry, I was just catching up. So now we're on to Chester Storage. There's an existing storage facility in Chester, Maryland. The applicant is proposing to expand that self-storage facility by 11,150 square feet. Here we are down on Kent Island, right off of Main Street in Chester. So inside the dashed red line is the existing facility. The proposed expansion will be directly adjacent to that within the solid red line. Properties are zoned town center. Originally, this project, the existing facility, was approved in June of 2003. They did do a field revision, which was approved in August of 2004. The mini warehouse expansion is a conditional use in the town center district, as long as it was in existence prior to September 7th of 2004, which this one was. They have gotten their conditional use approval from the Board of Appeals. They received that on May 15th of 2019. The existing property is within the critical area designated IDA. The new expansion is outside the critical area completely. There are no steep slopes, streams, wetlands, woodlands, or endangered or threatened species. This is the Google Street image of the existing facility and its site entrance. This will remain the site entrance for the property even if the expansion should be approved. This is the site, it's a vacant site that the expansion is being proposed on. As you can see right now, it just has a tractor trailer. I don't know if that's still there. This was taken a while ago. So here's the site plan overlaid on top of the aerial image, just so you can get a reference on the building orientation. You can see it matches up with what's there, so it won't look out of place at all. So with this project, the floor area needs to be calculated twice. They're allowed a 50% expansion of anything that existed before September 2004. So the existing square footage was 31,400 square feet. That would permit them up to 15,700 feet expansion. They are proposing 11,150, so they are clearly under their permitted floor area. So then we have to combine that with the existing to make sure that they are within the allotment of overall floor area, and they are. The total floor area for the project, if approved, is 42,550. They are under their impervious requirements, just barely, but they are. They are providing the 14 spaces and parking spaces that are required. They are well under their permitted height limit. There are no new sewer or water proposed. Only security lighting on the building is proposed, no new signage, no new office space. This is strictly just a storage building. Stormwater is going to be handled on site within the teal outlined areas. There's a sidewalk existing down here along the existing site. They're going to extend that, the length of the newly proposed site. There will be another access point to the proposed facility, but it will be gated and for emergency use only. As I mentioned, you will still access the site via the existing entranceway, which is down here. They're providing all the landscaping that's required, so that's on-site parking lot and street landscaping. In addition, there's landscaping required between the residential property and the proposed use. They're providing all of that. And this is the building renderings. The building it's a storage building. It's going to match color-wise what's there. The orientation is going to match, so it should look cohesive as one big site and one big project. And with that, I'll answer any questions you may have, but the applicant is here, and we will allow them to speak on behalf.
Great. My name is Cindy Todd. I'm with Lane Engineering, and we are excited to be here. With me is Mr. Jack Leone, the owner. And honestly, we have been working for the last couple years. We worked through the Board of Appeals, getting the conditional use for the property, and we have, over the last handful of months, worked very closely with staff for the major site plan approval, and we feel comfortable that our plans meet code, and we've met with all the agencies, and we're in compliance with all the codes and regulations. And so any questions that you have for us, please ask. I'd like to have Mr. Leone just kind of talk a little bit about his project and his property.
Good morning, I'm Jack Leone, owner. I was here a year or so ago, you may or may not remember. We still have a waiting list, and we still have customers who are clamoring for the space, so we're very interested and excited to get started if, provided you approve this today. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have relative to the project, if there are any.
A question, Mr. Leone, regarding the renderings, and perhaps this is an artifact of shading and other discoloration, but do the renderings that we're looking at here with the brown and blue, it does not appear that it actually matches what's existing?
It doesn't, I was noticing that as I was looking at the drawings, but the intent is that they will match the existing buildings
So
as closely as possible.
they don't look brown and tan
The
and
existing
blue?
building has a yellowish siding and a blue roof and blue doors,
Okay.
and these will have the same yellowish siding, blue roof.
Okay.
Mr. Lee, that's why I mentioned that they will match. I think it's a culprit of our copy machine.
Right.
It's scanned, then it's
I get it.
emailed, then it's
I
put
get it,
into a
but we
PowerPoint.
also, in our approval commentary, often say has to match significantly what was
Understood.
turned in or something. I don't want
It's always.
all of a sudden it matches, but it doesn't match what we approved.
No, you have to understand the existing buildings are faded somewhat from their existence, but as closely as we can match that, that's our intention.
Understood. Thank you.
Everything to look uniform.
Mr. Gunther, did you address the afforestation?
That
I
was-
didn't hear you mention that.
That was done with the previous site plan, the original.
Okay, because it's still mentioned in here that they need to address that and do the fee in lieu, so.
Right, it would be a fee in lieu.
Yes,
Yeah, there would be a
yes.
fee in lieu.
I apologize.
No, it's okay. I'm just trying to get.
Yes, they
obtain
addressed forest
clarification.
conservation previously and were, I believe, did fee in lieu. Then too, there's really no place on the site because they're allowed 80% impervious cover. And in forest conservation, you want contiguous forest or build forest-like conditions. So that would be why, the only reason we would allow them fee in lieu.
That'll have to be one of our findings that, yeah. Are there any other questions of the applicant at this time? Hearing none, we will take public comment at this time. No public comment. We'll entertain a recommendation to grant major site plan approval. Or deny.
Mr. Chairman, resolved that the Planning Commission regarding the request by Chester Storage LLC for major site plan approval for an 11,150 square foot, one-story climate-controlled storage building as an expansion of an existing self-storage facility along Main Street, and is more particularly described in Planning and Zoning File SP number 19-08-0031, hereby grants major site plan approval for the following conditions. 1, the buildings are constructed consistent with the architectural elevations not provided for approval, but at the existing site. Number 2, any outstanding comments stemming from agency reviews are addressed prior to final signatures. 3, any required legal documents approved, signed, and recorded. Number 4, all required estimates, bonds, sureties, review, and inspection fees must be submitted to the Department of Public Works, Department of Planning and Zoning as appropriate. 5, the applicant must complete and have recorded the administrative subdivision prior to final signature on the site plan. And last but not least, the catch-all, all requirements and signatures must be obtained.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Good luck.
I'll ask the commission, are we okay to continue, or would you like a break?
Does the applicant, does Steve Cahoon need? Steve might need.
Well,
Yeah.
no, if he's not here, we just remove him from the agenda. We call him once and he's gone.
You walk right over him.
Okay.
Hold on, we got
Now we're on break.
our sergeant at arms is not here.
All right, and then,
We'll give Mr. Calhoun a minute to set up.
yes, our architect's going to need to load up some information.
Okay, we'll give you a minute, get
Great.
set.
Thank you very much. Over here, Craig.
They stepped out for a minute.
I did ask if I could bring the old camera and paper back, but they said no.
Tape recorders?
The tape recorders, yeah.
Brutalist? Yeah, my problem.
it up and I was right.
All right,
it is.
Mr. Calhoun, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much.
the most exhibited
Steve Cahoon with the
idea
Department of
that
Public
anything
Works.
like that is
Here
brutal.
today to review the concept plan for the Kent Island Library expansion. There's two requests before the Planning Commission today. One is a shore buffer reduction, and the other is concept plan approval. I'll run through an overview of the presentation. We have the architect here today, Craig Williams with Becker Morgan Group. We also have Tom Davis with DMS and Associates here today, who provided the site concept plan. And then we also have Janet Salazar here with us today, the director of the Queen Anne's County Library, if we have any questions about the function of the library and how it operates. But I think everybody's familiar with the location of the library. It's north of Maryland 18. It's on the west side of Cox Creek. It is adjacent to the Kent Island Elementary School and the Bayside Elementary School complex. The property is 16 acres in size. It's zoned suburban estate. Suburban estate's an older zoning district. We don't have very many pockets of suburban estate. This one is definitely characterized by county parkland and institutional uses. So it also allows for residential development in the suburban estate zoning district. The property is entirely within the critical area and designated LDA, limited development area. And we are proposing, the county is proposing an 11,900 square foot expansion. And as I mentioned, we're requesting a shore buffer reduction from 100 feet, or from 300 feet down to 100 feet in the area of construction, and concept plan approval today. There's the 16-acre site. As you can see, most of it is wooded. The current library design is compact with the building and the parking and the access out to 18. There is an existing stormwater management facility that's located just to the east of the access drive. There's only a small area, the portion that's cleared, and that's the area where the proposed addition is to go. You can see the headwaters of Cox Creek there that run up the entire east side of the property. And the length and the configuration of the property makes it so that most of the property is within the 300-foot shore buffer. The concept plan shows the 300-foot shore buffer as it comes down and then hits the area of the proposed addition, but it also shows that the existing portions of the existing library fall within the 300-foot shore buffer, and areas of existing parking, most of the area of the existing parking lot falls within the 300-foot shore buffer. This is just a air photo showing a little bit more detail. The proposed addition would go on the east side of the building, and the parking would be expanded to the east as well. The existing building is 9,530 square feet. We're proposing an 11,900 square foot addition for a total of 21,430 square foot library facility. Currently, there's 71 parking spaces, and they're proposing 121. That is above the required parking based on the square footage of the building. The required parking based on the square footage of the building would be 96 parking spaces. But in consultation with the library and the fact that there's going to be meeting space and how the programming is done at the library, it is a very heavily used facility, and it's felt like the additional parking is required. The property with the LDA limitations is limited to 15% lot coverage, and the concept plan meets that with only 13.3% lot coverage. So we're within the critical area lot coverage limitations, within the forest clearing limitations, and fully comply with all critical area regulations.
Steve, before you get on to the shore buffer reduction, maybe you should explain, we don't hear about the 300-foot shore buffer much anymore. It's sort of a vestige of 30 years ago, so maybe you could explain why there's a 300-foot shore buffer here, which we
Sure.
rarely deal with anymore.
Sure. So back when critical area laws were first adopted, the county adopted a 300-foot shore buffer, which is more restrictive than the critical area law. And
Or
at that,
political reasons for that?
at that time, it was uncertain how critical area laws, regulations would be incorporated into the local ordinances. And the county tried to put more restrictive provisions in place to implement critical area in the hopes we would not have to do a full-blown critical area ordinance. That did not come to fruition. What ended up happening is we put the 300-foot shore buffer in place for non-residential uses and high-density residential uses, and then had to adopt the full critical area program as prescribed by the state anyway. So,
But it's a vestige of 30-year-ago efforts to resist, let's put it that way, the full implementation of the critical area mandates. It didn't work, and it's unfortunately still floating around in these few zoning districts that it may not make sense to continue with, but it's still there.
so in this zoning district, the standard critical area shore buffer is 100 feet. And we're asking that that be the set regulation for this property, and not the 300-foot as prescribed only in our zoning
This is
ordinance.
permissible because more than 50% of the property is within the shore buffer, the 300-foot shore buffer.
So along with the 300-foot shore buffer, there's a provision that if the majority of the property, more than 50%, is within the shore buffer, the 300-foot shore buffer, the Planning Commission has the ability to grant a reduction in that shore buffer for reasonable use of the property. At one point, back in the 80s, that was a variance before the Board of Appeals. But as the code got updated, as the critical area ordinance and program was put in place, it became a Planning Commission review and reduction as opposed to a Board of Appeals variance. So on this site, and with this shore buffer reduction, the 300-foot shore buffer covers 75% of the property. The new building will be between 300 foot and 100 foot, as well as the proposed parking. Portions of the existing building are in the 300-foot buffer. Much of the shore buffer will remain as it is today. You know, there's many acres of the shore buffer that will not be impacted with this reduction. It's only in the area where construction will occur around the building and where the parking is expanded. And as I said, we comply with the critical area, all the current critical area regulations. This is just a blow-up showing where the extent of the parking, and this is to tie it into the existing parking lot in an efficient manner. The proposed addition is to tie into the existing building, and for the function of the building, that's the best location to put the addition. And our architect will speak to that in just a minute. So the architect's going to review Craig Williams will review the interior of the building and the elevations a little bit. We're requesting Planning Commission feedback on that, on the elevations. And this is concept plan. We're looking at a concept plan approval and a shore buffer reduction so that we can move into engineering. But this project will return to the Planning Commission for a site plan approval in the future. So,
I think it's important to point out, given what the elevations look like, that the design guidelines that we often are asked to review in the TC and the other zoning districts, those design guidelines do not apply to the SE district.
I need to connect you up.
Unfortunately. High roofs apparently are okay in the SE district.
Mr. Cahoon, before we go further, can I question your comment about mitigation for the tree removal? Can you expand upon that, since, you know, we just talked about fees in lieu, and does the county pay itself for fee in lieu, or what are your?
So with critical area tree removal in the LDA, it's one-to-one replacement, and we will have to replace that tree clearing. If it's not likely on this site because of the amount of woodlands that already exist, it'll need to be replaced on another county site.
You're not proposing a fee in lieu, you're applying direct one-to-one mitigation.
Yes, sir.
In another critical area location.
On county-owned property.
Right.
Correct.
Has that property been identified?
Not at this point. We have, no, we have not selected the property. That's a conversation we have to have with Parks.
Is the area of woodland that's being removed a designated woodland? And does the removal comply with Chapter 18, Section 166, that provides that no more than 20% of a, can't read my own
Of the
writing, of an
critical-
area designated woodland can be disturbed? Is that pertinent in this case, and how?
Yes, it is. So the 20% woodland clearing on the property within the critical area applies to the total amount of woodlands that exist on the property. And I think the proposed clearing is 4/10 of an acre out of the, I don't have the
Size of the
8.5.
site?
It's not the size, it's the amount of the existing woodlands.
Right,
So
20%.
20% of the existing woodlands, which make up an estimated 12 acres of the site.
Is 12 acres of woodlands?
I have to refer to the concept
Okay.
plan to answer that
Okay.
question. And we just switched over to the architect, so Mr. Davis might be able to help me with that.
The entire back part of the property is wooded,
Uh-huh.
and it's, I don't know, it's at least 10 acres. I don't have the exact square footage, but we're within that 20% clearing.
You are, okay.
Good morning. I can walk you through just a kind of
Can
brief.
you identify yourself?
Oh, Craig Williams with Becker Morgan Group. I can walk you through a brief narrative of the building and how we developed this, the addition, and its connection to the existing building. You may be able to see on here the existing and new. I can trace it out quickly. The existing building follows this line down here, picks up. So everything to the right is new and everything to the left is existing. One of the big challenges with this building is that they wanted to remain open during construction. So we had to develop a phasing sort of concept that could happen. So the central core, which is where the workroom is located and where all the staff is located, has its mechanical mezzanine above that. So when this new building is complete, it'll have all the restrooms required for a library use, 4 individual use toilets and a staff toilet. Mechanical room will be up and running to supply everything that's required for this new addition. At that time, the entire facility will move over into the new addition. We'll close off the old, renovate the existing building, connect into the mechanical systems, and then once that's complete, it will all be opened up again as one facility. So basically, everything to the right is the library, what we think of as books and program spaces, very small ones, and toilet rooms. To the left are all the meeting rooms and classrooms, so that all of that can be done somewhere else if they have programs during the construction phase. But the library should be, day-to-day use should be able to continue. The woods, the current forest is about, we're really close into that cleared area now. So to really respect that, we've created this really sort of a glass box that allows a lot of outdoor views into that nature. We've done a lot of libraries, and this is just a trend that we are seeing continuing to grow, which is this, bringing the outside in. It's a term, it's called biophilia. It creates a better space, creating natural lighting views to outside. Much different than the existing facility, which was the old way libraries were done, which is, you're sort of centered on looking at the books, very small meeting rooms. It really wasn't about program spaces. So what we've done here is create a more modern facility that shows a 50-year future of technology growth, which is we're seeing for libraries as well, maker spaces and innovation centers. They're really technology hubs for the future. We have a children's area with a breakout space to an outdoor, we don't want to call it playground, but it's really an outdoor classroom. Some stroller parking, which is a requirement for the library staff. The main adult stacks is where most of the books are going to be. A teen area, and some breakout study rooms that also take in those exterior views to really sort of enjoy that view. And they're almost like pods in this glass box. And we have some additional ones over here for study, history room. And as we notice, this is circulation, right directly in the middle of the building. The old entrance is here. We've shifted that over to here, central to the, between the new and the old. As most of the patrons enter, they have complete view of the main circulation space. Staff can monitor the main entrance. They can monitor teen, children's, and the adult. Our concept usually for libraries, we like to see if we can get the entire facility to run with basically one employee, if it has to. And really, that's one person could stand in this area and monitor pretty much 90% of the library. After hours use, there's a glass wall here and another door here into the main library. That shuts down, and the entire meeting room facility in the existing building can be used for after hours use. We'll be using card access, temporary control, so someone could rent that classroom right there. They have access to the toilet rooms and just that classroom, or an event can use everything, all 6 meeting rooms. We have a very large meeting room with a dividing wall, holds about 250 people, small kitchenette, catering kitchen, with its own separate entrance, so the caterers can come in from a back parking lot here and serve any of the functions going on there. Kind of a really a brief description of the building. Again, we actually have a outdoor patio out here. Again, trying to bring the inside outside so we can have outdoor reading areas on nice days, outdoor program space. So right now that green space is very beautiful, but you can't access it. It's really treated like the back of the building. Our hope is to completely change that and to make this really almost like it's a front yard for the building. So I'm going to go quickly here to the updated outdoor views. So this is at the existing building from the left, mechanical mezzanine that sort of stretches between those two buildings, and we've tried to hide that back with a darker material, keep the ceilings as low as possible. Very large voluminous space in here, but we're still actually keeping the roof lines similar to the existing building. The existing building will get all new windows to bring it up to the new energy code. All the interior walls will be replaced with new insulation to bring it up to the energy code. So picking up some of those lines and the materials, we're bringing, our concept with this was not to replicate every detail of the existing building, but really to pull the new elements into the existing building. So we have a composite wood material here, which is, it has at least a 50-year warranty. It's a wood material that's impregnated with acrylic on a composite material, very stable, lasts a very long time. We'll be putting some elements on the existing building to pull that across, and then we have some site walls that will pull some of the brick into that as well. It's showing a night view of it. Again, glowing, more inviting to pull people into it, something that we're not seeing in the current facility. And with our new windows we're putting in the old facility, there'll be large areas of glass, very few mullions, again, so you can have those views into the building. Looking from the back, this is a little bit of an exaggeration because we've removed some trees just so you can see the building, but the tree line is really going to be right up onto this patio. So it's going to be a great shaded space for reading and enjoying outdoor space. This is the children's area with its breakout play area. This is the teen area with tables along that window so the teens can see out, have an area to study. Outdoor seating, one of the study rooms, or there's actually 2 study rooms in there, very low windows. And you'll notice these little windows we've placed around throughout the building. This is, again, it's seeing the ground. If you're seated, you have a nice view that you can see out, but it's limiting that view a little bit. So you still feel some privacy, but you have that connection to outside. We have the same composite wood soffits, pulling large overhangs to shade the building to help meet our energy code requirements and daylighting requirements. Side patio, possibility of a fire pit and some outdoor seating, study rooms. And again, the main entrance, vestibule here, the wood composite. And looking into the teen area, it's very natural landscaping, Eastern Shore sort of native grasses, things like that. I don't know if I have, again. So that's what I've got here. Comments?
What is the exterior building material? Is that concrete on the new portion?
The gray?
Yes.
That is a cementitious siding. It's a
Hardy
rain
plank?
screen system. It's not hardy. We are actually trying to avoid doing anything that's inexpensive like that. This is actually called Okoskin. It is a 5/8 inch thick cementitious siding with a 50-year warranty applied on a rain screen system, which will be a composite, non-conductive type rain screen, so we can keep our thermal barrier. Behind that, we will have rock wool and then an exterior sheathing, waterproofing. So there will be about a 2-inch gap between that siding and the insulation. So it's definitely modern, meets and exceeds the energy code requirements. The wood composite is applied exactly the same way. It's just a different material finish.
What is cementitious? You've taught me a new word.
Like hardy, that's what we
It's
see
like
most of the
hardy board?
places. But this is actually where if you've ever seen hardy and you break it, it's a different color inside because it's painted, even if it's painted at the factory. The Okoskin is the same color all the way through. So it's a concrete panel, really, is what it's made of. And it really harks back to the brick. It's very similar as far as clay-like material.
So how close to you is this going to be a lead?
No, we're not
No?
doing LEED, but it will definitely be green.
How close to net zero would you say the project is?
We would like to be better.
that-
Unfortunately, we do have some budget constraints that we aren't able to do,
Well,
geothermal.
I've heard based off the design, you're already significantly over budget. And by going net zero, the county can recoup a lot of funding. The initial cost may come up a little bit higher, but you recoup your costs a lot faster
I
for
agree.
the operation of the building. Have you looked at that concept?
We have. The entire team has. And I think multiple times, actually. We revisited it many times. And I think at the end, we really the challenge of the initial budget has proved impossible to really follow that as a net zero. Unfortunately, with some of our choices that we have here, we are providing alternates for other architectural elements. If we can afford it, we'll build the metal roof. If we can afford it, we'll do better siding. But when it comes to our HVAC, we had to make that decision to this point. We couldn't design 2 systems simultaneously and hope to choose one if we had enough money once the final bids came in.
So what was your cost per square foot versus a traditional brick and mortar type construction versus all the glazing and steel?
We've kind of gone back and forth. I think we're somewhere around a little over $400 a square foot, which is significantly less than what we're seeing in library trends. Most of our libraries are running around 500 to 550 a square foot. So I feel our team has done a great job of reducing that cost as much as possible, but still creating an efficient building. We haven't skimped on the insulation thermal requirements at all. Our HVAC it's not the most efficient system, but it's a good system. To keep the cost down as much as possible, we're doing VRFs. We're doing 2 package units on the rooftop in the back, so we're hiding that.
I thought all the mechanical systems were in the mezzanine. Now you're incorporating rooftop equipment,
Yeah,
which isn't shown in your concept plan, which now adds additional height.
Oh, no, it's actually, it's on the concept plan. Let me bring that up for you. I guess that's a good thing that you didn't notice it, because that was our hope. This is on the second floor mezzanine. Everything in here is inside, and then this is a outside area that is at the same height as this. We have a wall that's blocking it, so you don't
It's
see
a
it.
screen wall.
Yeah, so really it's just open to the air. And then we have the 2 package units, and then 2 parts for a split system for a VRF. So these 2 are providing our fresh air to the building. And these 2 are supplying all the individual VRFs throughout the building for the heating and cooling. Everything else then is inside, because we really like to keep as much inside the building as possible, which is why we really like geothermal. We wish we could afford it for this one, but we looked at the option life cycle cost. It just was not affordable. Go back to renderings or leave it on this?
I guess I'll share with you 2 design comments.
Would you like me to go to the renderings or?
Sure. The first one is the front entrance of the building. Obviously, the area that's the yellow part of the elevation is the new main entrance. And I would just suggest looking at some more of the site work before you get to the entrance that helps guide someone towards that. In other words, the way a parking lot is for the existing building, it brings you all the way up into, and it seems to emphasize those doors of the existing building. Whereas you want to really emphasize the doors of the new addition as being the main entrance. And therefore, I think you possibly could use some more asphalt or something right in front of the main entrance to point that out as being more of the entrance that people should focus on when they come in.
Agree.
Okay, so
Yeah, we can definitely look at that.
That's one thing, and the second thing is, what you show in the monitors is 20% better than what shows here.
Well, when we got that preview for the presentation, I'm like, oh, no, that's older, yeah.
An area always of concern is when you have a existing building of a certain style, you have an addition of a totally different architectural style, and how do you meld those 2 together so that there's a seamless transition, and it's within that area. Now, the fact that you have a yellow entrance and vestibule helps stand it off, but I still think you need to focus on just that indentation, which I think is great that that everything's indented, but in that, so that the average person, when they look at it, can clearly see that they're 2 different, sort of buildings that don't. I guess what you want to avoid is a new addition feeling like it was shoved up against an existing building.
Exactly.
And that's what you need to focus on, so that it reads as a separate addition that is meant to be there. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
These are not concerns or issues that we are new to us. For this, it was definitely from the beginning was how to integrate this new to the old, and we looked at several options. We had looked at one point trying to pull the brick more over, and I think we just It wasn't working.
It sometimes doesn't work. What
Right.
you need to do is you have a new addition, and it's just the way how you break from one to another without shoving them together. And you don't necessarily need to have the same materials or the same anything, but the transition's got to read separately as, you know, two separate sort of buildings and not shoved together.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, we'll look at, yeah, we'll look at that and see. I mean, we feel like that was successful, but we can definitely talk with our team and see if, you know, if there's ways to improve it.
Yeah, you just want to make sure that it totally reads as two separate buildings and that the break is complementary.
Ms. Tallheimer?
I think you've probably answered this through your cost discussion, but I understand from a programmatic perspective why you would want the extra parking more than required. But I'm a little concerned that we have so much asphalt in the buffer area, and I'm wondering whether you have considered an impervious surface of some type for that parking.
Actually, some of the spaces, there was some spaces that are being proposed on the access drive coming in, and we're considering that as pervious pavers. So some of that will be
Pervious pavers, that's
yes.
what I meant, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
And then
misspoke.
the main parking lot, though, because we figure that's going to have the most wear and tear, will be a bituminous concrete parking lot to match the existing. And then stormwater management will be provided all on the outside of the new parking lot, whereas those pervious pavers in themselves are address stormwater management by the volume of water that can
Right.
trickle down through the stone reservoir.
And you didn't consider pervious concrete for the back?
We did not
the
at
new
this point.
parking?
So the 10 or 11 spaces there on the entrance road coming in, those will be pervious, but, and we can talk with the Department of Public Works, maybe this outer bay of spaces to the bottom of the parking lot, maybe some of those can be pervious. We're just getting into the design
Okay.
right now.
We'll take a look at where we can add that. I mean, we did it here at this building, and other places, we want to incorporate those types of practices.
Particularly since it's so close to in the
Considering
buffer.
similar system that's out here in the parking lot,
I
I
didn't
think it's a
know
great
what-
opportunity for the county to lead by example, obviously with the critical area intrusion slash expansion. And while I may, Mr. Davis, while you're here, so I'm looking at the floodplain lines, right? The Zone X and Zone AE, I guess it's a annual designation or an elevation, right? And you have significant parking in those areas and driveways. I'm sort of wondering where your stormwater practices would be placed and how you're gonna, how you're gonna park cars in a flooded parking lot.
well, I mean, I think that line is like a elevation 7 or so. And our
One of them's 5.
5, okay.
The AE
The
is a
intent
5.
is that the parking lot grading on the corner will be at least above the floodplain elevation of the 100-year flood.
You'll bring that up.
Yes, that corner will be brought up. And then our intent is to have a stormwater system that treats the back of the building, down the side, and the outfall will actually tie into the existing stormwater management system. And on this lower corner, about where he has the cursor right now, that'll be a submerged gravel wetland. But the elevation of the parking lot will be brought up to at least the 100-year flood elevation of 5.
Have you looked to see whether you need a variance for that under the floodplain ordinance?
There's no.
600 square, isn't it 600 cubic feet?
No, they took that out years ago.
They did?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's no limit on filling the floodplain anymore. So.
And have these elevations and these sort of concept plans understood at this stage, taken into consideration sea level rise and increased precipitation levels? And just, we're here, we're treading up against the increasingly soggy ground, and with this project and others, and being recently appointed to the county's resiliency planning work group, we were in this very room for 6 hours yesterday talking about not the if, but the when. And the predictions are downright scary. And this panel received a briefing from Eastern Shore Land Conservancy 6 months ago, let's say, plus or minus, and all of us sort of went into the back room for lunch and went, wow, that was a bit sobering. And I want to be obviously careful and sensitive and protective of the downstream environments, and at the same time lead by example for the county. Therefore, let's not show the wrong way to do things when we've got time and planning in front of us. Mr. Wisnowski, you were coming up to say something, I see.
But not on the site plan. But
Okay.
I agree with what you said, Mr. Lee.
I don't know, Tom, Mr. Davis, I didn't lose sleep over this, but I'm looking at these flood lines and I see concerns and problems, especially if, stormwater retention and your outfalls and your submerged gravel wetlands, which need to be wet, but they don't like salt water. And Cox Creek is a impacted water body, severely polluted, and this is the headwaters, and it's county property. And when we're talking about budgets and over budgets and constraints, these aren't they are not inexpensive practices, right? Stormwater management. Over time, especially if they're flooded and have fish swimming in them, with storm surge and increased sea level rise and greater precipitation rates, that causes concern. So while you're working through this, I would request, please, that is taken into consideration and we look at those impacts as we move forward in our planning, especially in these areas that have been known to flood already, and they're only going to get more so impacted.
So the intent right now was to bring that corner up to at least the 100-year flood elevation of 5, but we can take a look at bringing it up and.
You would mention you're putting your submerged gravel wetlands in that buffer, and it just, I don't know, it's not clear to me at this point, because obviously we're conceptual level of investigation here, but you're asking for feedback and I'm providing it.
I appreciate it. Topographically, that's the way the ground slopes, so, it's logical to put the stormwater there. And we have another system up that would treat the rooftop water. It's at a higher elevation. That would be a bioretention system. So the two systems would feed together and then ultimately drain into the existing pond, which already has an outfall into the non-tidal wetlands there.
So architecturally, have you looked at capturing some of that rainwater into cisterns to be used as non-potable, to help with sewage and things of that nature? Which could.
Have a few areas that we could easily do that.
Which could be cost effective, increase our zero or decrease the carbon footprint, and be cost effective. So I have some concerns with the concept, honestly. I share Mr. Douglas's, we're abutting a new versus old. It's, in my opinion, it's very urban, in a rural environment. And even though this is a concept plan, I'm not real pleased with the concept. I understand we have cost overruns that won't even allow the project to go forward. So there's going to be significant changes that I think have to be made. I'm in support of the library addition, but I just think maybe it's a little premature, in my opinion, to be receiving all this information, considering we don't, there's way too many things out there to be addressed.
Was there a conscious decision made to not apply, frankly, any of the design guidelines from the adjacent zoning districts that have mandatory design guidelines?
Well, let me jump in here. So it's a shame Ms. Dobson's not here, because I'm going to preference my comments with a story. When I first came here 4.5 years ago, it was right when the Denny's restaurant was coming in for approval. And
salmon-colored tile.
They laid out the architecture, and I thought, wow, this is nice, this is fresh, this is new. And Mrs. Dobson said, don't you know we have something called Eastern Shore vernacular, and it's brick and peaked roofs. So I learned a bit of a lesson. My point is, this is a far cry from what we traditionally have seen on the Eastern Shore. And as a previous partner in a landscape architecture planning and architecture firm, we've done libraries. And we've done them more in the traditional sense, which this is not. This is a deviation from that. I'm not suggesting it's wrong or incorrect. All I'm saying, it's not what we traditionally have seen here on the Eastern Shore, nor is it traditionally what we have seen for libraries. So I just want to make sure it's well vetted and everyone's comfortable with this concept. which is a deviation from what we normally see here on the Eastern Shore. I think what Mr. Reese said and what Mr. Douglas said are valid points, that maybe the architecture should be a bit more in tune with a more traditional type of architecture and something that we've seen here on the Eastern Shore, if that's possible. That was all.
Thank you, sir. Lee?
Actually, I like the clean-cut appearance of it, quite frankly.
And that's fine. I just want to make sure we have all those questions answered, because once you begin to redesign and redesign architecture, it's an expense, it's a cost, and we want to be as efficient as possible. So I guess the point is, if you have some real issues or concern, let's address them now, so the architect gets a clear direction on coming back to us with something that we think we can embrace.
We have something that's somewhere between Eastern Shore vernacular and brutalist.
That's his word.
Yeah, I've seen Brulist. That's not Brulist.
Pretty close.
Agree to disagree. I think that's where we are, actually. We've done many libraries that go from very traditional to Lewis Library being one of them, to extremely modern. And I think we've hit a sweet spot with this one. The existing building, built in the 80s, was a very modern building when it was built. There's the schools next to it also. These are modern buildings. Every building is modern when it's built. So, this isn't a historic building, so we don't need to match it historically. And we don't, we aren't in a historic district, so what we did is we took all the important aspects, which were the proportions, the roof lines, all those areas, and pulled it across into a building that says to the public, we are a new facility. We would like you to enjoy all the new things that we have to offer for the next 50 years, possibly the next 100 years. And that's what this building says. It does not say we are the same old library, we're just larger. It says we are a new library. Please come and try all our new things that we have to offer. And when people walk into any new facility, any new library that's been redesigned, they are always shocked at what libraries can offer now. And this building needs to be modernized from 40 years old to what libraries are being done today. Yep.
I have another suggestion. If you take into account the two suggestions I made earlier, the third suggestion I have is this presentation. If you could do like a 3D isometric of it, which shows it, because then it will show how the building breaks up a bit and how it reads. Now it's the different planes of the building all come together, whereas if you could see it a bit, like looking down a bit and be able to rotate it a bit and see the building, I think it would read a lot better and come across a lot better if you could see it in those terms.
Actually, I agree, because I was intending to do a 3D walkthrough with you today, but technology-wise, it wouldn't work out. So I luckily had some renderings
like a 3D,
on here.
but isometric that shows all the massing, shows
Well, so, I was
colors.
going to be able to show you that
Yeah.
today, but unfortunately, because otherwise, yeah, I would have liked to have had that. So you can, because the way the mezzanine reaches out into the building, there is definitely a crossing over. You can really sort of pick it up here, but can't really get the full impact of that. But the building does blend in massing.
With this rendering, I just want to touch on what Mike said. This rendering, I've had some feedback on, and what's on the screen right now shows just a portion of the old library. When you see the whole library that exists today in the context with the new library, some of the comments I've heard over the last week is the very different architectural styles between the existing and the new. So, if that's a concern, then I think what Mike was saying is...
Yeah, it's one of the other two items I mentioned, though, too, is to also look at, again, about joining the two different styles together. And also the front entrance, making that more pronounced, that this is the front entrance and the easy way to get there.
Mr. Egger, you join the table?
I
Please
have.
identify yourself for the record.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Lee Edgar with the Department of Public Works. If I may, I want to speak to a few of the items that were brought up, all very good points. The Department of Public Works has the unique position of working on this project not only from the regulatory standpoint as it relates to stormwater management floodplain, but also in representing the owner, working with library staff and the architect, and preparing a design that meets the needs of the library, conforms with modern stormwater and floodplain requirements, and keeping it within the financial constraints that we have. And we have been working with the commissioners on that. A few different things regarding stormwater. As Tom had alluded, it is somewhat conceptual. We have spoken with Tom, and we have he has tentatively identified permeable pavement, probably permeable pavers, which would match some of the colors in the building that would go in there. The submerged gravel wetlands seem very appropriate with its adjacency to some of the wetlands. So some of the ESD practices that are proposed are very much consistent and proper. There was a good point on the floodplain and fill that would relate to non-tidal floodplain. In this case, it's tidal. So elevating some of those areas with the parking lots is not so much of an issue. The project, as you see it, is within budget. And this project has probably been one of the more fulfilling and challenging projects we've had to work with, in that trying to keep it within the budget and the constraints of, we're looking at receiving a sizable grant from the state, as well as the commissioners matching that 50%. So we have had to work very closely to keep the costs down. And as such, some of the things we talked about, LEED certification and such, just are not opportunities because we don't have the financial ability to do that. However, there are very many different energy saving things that are being incorporated into the project. One of the things I wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to do is to speak with Janet, who is the director for the library, and she can speak to some of the uses and designs. One of the unique things, years ago when I first walked into Centerville Library about 15 years ago, I was very surprised by how noisy it was. And I guess that shows it had been a while since I walked into a library, because I remembered it quiet. But libraries are different today, and one of the unique aspects that we found is letting that light in. They are social areas. They're places where programs and things are held. And that's where the program space is a critical component of this. And the vast expanses of glass and things, with the idea that it could bring in light, tie it into the adjacent surroundings, the woodlands and all that, and then those open spaces. And the parking also addresses some of the parking concerns that Julie, our branch librarian, is here as well, and she can speak to some of the concerns. Even though it provides enough parking per code, we want to make sure that there's sufficient parking for some of the events. So anyway, that's my long-winded way of saying that you've raised some very good concerns. Those are things that we have looked at. And if it pleases the commission, because we are in a tight schedule for it, we would be delighted to sit down and discuss that complementary transition between the buildings and things as the project proceeds from concept plan to site plan, where most of the detailed site engineering will go. Thank you.
Mr. Egger, if I may, while you're here, you obviously are fully aware, and you're actually on the workshop, the resilience workshop, as is Mr. Cahoon with me, so I appreciate the county's involvement and investment in that. And sort of going back, I've already said what I wanted to say on the sea level rise concerns, but obviously this is in the heart of our MS4, pending MS4 jurisdictional permit, right, the urban stormwater, and that excess of parking, although it sounds like it's relatively justified or it's premeditated to be something to look for the future of expansion and increased use of the facility. How would this impact that MS4, and how would that, right, do you understand that we're paving and we should be paving less because we're gonna have to come back and treat that pavement at some point. So it makes sense to me that we should address that now. And how do you see that besides the pervious pavement option, or could there be shared parking? Yeah. Right, the schools are across the street and next door. are there other more creative ways we could look at reducing, because you're exceeding the required by 24, 25 spaces. It's very,
Almost
very
5,000 square
It's
feet.
very, very expensive to put down pervious pavers on. So I'd just like to hear your thoughts on that, or at least, now that I've said it, it's sort of on your plate to sort of address moving forward.
Absolutely, and it's a relatively easy one to answer. Of course, parking's unique. Either people provide too much or not enough. In this case, the initiative behind providing enough parking is ensuring that there is enough there to support the events and activities that will be going on at the library. And there is tremendous demand for the meeting rooms. Julie, the branch librarian, she can speak to that. It's very difficult to get it reserved because there's so much need. So this design does provide for that. On the parking, excellent question. For the MS4, any new development that goes in, or even some existing, provided that stormwater management practices, specifically ESD to the MEP, if the ESD to the MEP is provided, that area effectively, what MS4 does is you're looking at providing management for untreated surfaces. So in this case, it would be all treated because all the parking that's proposed here will need to meet ESD to the MEP. That may be through a combination of the submerged gravel wetlands or the permeable pavement. In the case of the permeable pavement, where those spots are permeable, from a stormwater perspective, the pavement effectively doesn't exist. So all the permeable stalls, from a stormwater perspective, effectively won't be there. The areas that are traditional pavement would need to be treated with ESD practices, and they would be such that MS4 would not have any implications on MS4.
And sorry to keep monopolizing the conversation, but back to Mr. Davis, that corner of the, is that the southeast corner of the parking lot there where the flood zone, crosses the newly proposed parking spaces, would that be a retaining wall on that back edge to bring that elevation up?
No, it would just slope off to
So
the
it'd be-
surface of the submerged gravel wetland.
Okay.
Is my proposal. So I've graded it out right now.
Okay, yeah, it's just, it doesn't come, obviously doesn't
No,
shown
it's
here.
not on these.
Just trying to mentally wrap my head around what that would
The purpose
look
of these
like.
plans honestly was just for the shore buffer from our aspect of it, the shore buffer reduction, so
Right.
specific to that.
Yeah, just in
We're-
this
we're actively-
rendering, sorry, go ahead.
We're actively working on the design.
Okay, yeah, just in the rendering here, it looks like there's trees that you could pull a few leaves off from your from your parking lot space. But that's not to be the case. Not to that extreme.
All right, in this rendering here?
No, back to the site plan, the elevation.
We're actually clearing some trees to build the stormwater system.
Yeah, so here, right, so you've got.
Yeah. So there'll be a margin of trees that'll be cleared on this lower side, but we're still in compliance with the 20% that Ms. Tolliver had mentioned.
Okay, and also, Mr. Davis, if you don't mind, sort of right here, you've got your non-tidal wetlands buffer. Can you
We've modified that
explain why that
because
looks like it's in?
that was originally drawn from the stormwater pond till slope, and that's not a regulated wetland. So that'll be addressed on the final
I
construction.
see, okay.
drawings. That wetland buffer came from the till of the slope of the stormwater system, which is not regulated as a wetland.
Right. That's mislabeled.
Yes.
That's a big mislabel.
Yeah, it's a big mislabel.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Just to clarify, I pulled up the concept plan, and to answer Ms. Tolliver's question, it's .34 acres of clearing, which is 4% of the existing woodlands on site, so it is in
Mr.
compliance
Cahoon, you have
with-
to speak up. We
I'm
really
sorry.
can't hear you.
The woodland clearing is .34 acres on the site, which is 4% of the existing woodlands, which is in compliance with that 20% limit you were asked about.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, gentlemen. This time we'll entertain any public comment.
Let me get out of the way.
So if you would please identify yourself and where you're from.
Good morning. My name is Ellie Bassett. I am your Miles Wide River Keeper. I work with Shore Rivers, which works to protect the waterways of the Eastern Shore, including Queen Anne's County. So particularly I focus on Eastern Bay, the Wye River, and the Miles River. So I share a lot of the concerns that were brought up today. I just wanted to come and give a bit more background on this watershed in particular. I think you could say that I am favorable with amendments. The parking lot is concerning to me in particular. Cox Creek, well, Eastern Bay itself has predominantly better water quality than any other rivers on the Eastern Shore. However, Cox Creek over the past few years has seen a decline trend in water quality, which is unique. All of the neighboring water quality tributaries have actually seen an improvement. So Crab Alley, Prospect Bay, Shipping Creek have seen upward trends of water quality. Cox Creek is declining. What we also know is as we go upstream while testing, we tend to see our water quality decline as we go further upstream. So that means that the pollution is coming from our land. It's not what's coming from the Chesapeake Bay. That also means that we have an opportunity to improve this water quality. The county has recently invested in dollars to work to identify best management practices in Old Love Point Park, which is even further upstream in the headwaters of Cox Creek. I think that putting in additional parking, which is not required, putting in pavement and removing mature forest within the critical area buffer will threaten and jeopardize that project that the county is investing in upstream. Again, I think also I know that sea level rise was brought up by Mr. Lee, but just to give some more facts, according to Maryland's Environmental Resource and Land Information Network, which is an online tool that Maryland DNR operates, this portion, the parking lot portion in particular, is at threat to a 5 to 10 foot in opinion to justify the impacts to the already impaired Cox Creek. I understand it's a concept plan, and with that, I'm excited at the opportunity to see some better ESD to the MEP. I know that the MS4 was brought up. I'd just like to also point out that the MS4 also requires education opportunity to kind of check 2 boxes at once. Considering this is an institutional building that gets many residents from the county, this is an opportunity to showcase what storm water management can be. Not only that, but incorporate some signage and education with that storm water management. I personally liked the renderings. The only thing that I was disappointed in is that I didn't see any native plantings added to that. So we talked a lot about bringing the outdoors inside, but we didn't necessarily talk about how we can enhance the outside. I think there's a lot of opportunity, again, to enhance this in a way that benefits Cox Creek, because right now all I see are more impairments.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bassett.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity.
Any other public comment?
County library system. And thank you for looking at our concept today, and I appreciate all the feedback. I just wanted to speak a little bit to the modern concept, because public libraries in the 21st century are not the book warehouses they used to be, where we were concerned about light getting to the books and deteriorating. They're really more community centers, and we do a lot of programming. Yes, there will always be books in libraries. I'm not saying that there wouldn't be. And we will always be on the forefront of literacy, but we are also on the forefront of STEM programming and making sure that we have educational opportunities for all of our community to supplement what the schools do, to supplement what the community college does. It's really self-directed learning at the library, and having an open concept and having light come in invites people to come in and stay and do their learning, and that's why we have so much light in our building, and that's why we asked for so much light in our building, so that people feel welcome when they come into the library. It used to be you walked into the library and you didn't want to stay very long because we had uncomfortable seating and people would tell you to be quiet, and that is not the way it is now. And that's why our concept is what the concept is. And I'm sure that by the time we get done, we will have married those 2 buildings together, and people will be very impressed with the final concept. So I appreciate you listening to me, and I just wanted to speak to that part of it. I'm happy to answer any good questions you might have for me. So,
Hearing none, thank you.
I've got an interesting request of you, Mr. Chairman. Just by those of you in the audience, by show of hands, and you've been watching and listening and seeing these renderings. Can I this is not scientific by any means, it's just a public snapshot. By show of hands, how many of you like this project? The appearance of the rendering.
Well, what question are you asking, Mr. Lee?
Do you, I just asked my question. Is that something that the public, just with your exposure today, you could see that as an attractive building in your community? All right, and then not so much. All right, not quite 50-50, 60-40 maybe, but okay. Just
Mr.
for what it's
Chairman.
worth. Moving forward.
This reminds me of a discussion that we had when I was on the city council in Annapolis, and the developer came to us and wanted to develop the Park Place property. And those of you who've been to Annapolis, which is probably everybody know, everything in Annapolis is
Sheila,
brick,
can you do the same thing? And
brick Federalist. And the developer of Park Place wanted to fashion his building after the Naval Academy, which is granite and limestone. And there was a great architectural debate about the appropriateness of granite and limestone in the city of Annapolis, which is brick Federalist. Even the mansion that the governor lives in was really originally Victorian and was reconverted to be brick Federalist so that it would fit in. And so I think and obviously if you've been to Annapolis since Park Place has been built, which I'm sure you have, it's an attractive and desirable development. And I think I especially like the light and the rear rendering of this building. I'm always concerned a little bit about flat roofs, not for their appearance, but for their utility. It seems like they leak a lot. I don't know how you deal with that these days. Maybe that's an old problem. But I'm wondering, and I'm not an architect by training, although I had a class in architectural drawing. I'm wondering if there isn't some way to better marry the brick with the concrete by bringing the brick as a trim of some sort across the front, or a wall that's brick that somehow makes them look like they're just not two pieces that were stuck together, but two pieces that were designed to be functionally appropriate and also visually connected. That's for what it's worth. That's my observation. I think that sometimes things that aren't so great on the drawing can turn out to be pretty good, even though they're not brick Federalist or Eastern Shore vernacular.
Agreed. Thank you. Sir, please identify yourself and where you're from.
Josh Willis. I'm a lifelong resident of Kent Island. I'm a local business owner and musician. I'm going to start off by saying I love the library. I spent my whole life going into the library, so nothing against the library. In fact, I also love the idea of having additional space there to do more meetings and everything else that you guys need to move forward on in the future. But with that said, I also love the surrounding waters of Kent Island. I grew up on them. Most of my family are watermen, and I'll admit I don't understand the history of the 300-foot buffer zone, but I'm sure it was put into place for some reason, and I'm sure it had something to do with protecting the water. So if it still exists, being able to willy-nilly change it to 100 feet without changing the overall 300-foot buffer for everyone seems kind of contradictory into setting up policies. So just wanted to put that out there, that I'm all for protecting the waters. I'm all for having a better library, though I don't like the way it looks, because I feel like if you live on the Eastern Shore, you like the way the Eastern Shore beauty is. If I wanted to live on the Western Shore and see modern buildings, I would do that. But I just wanted to put it out there that I feel like although the 300-foot buffer zone may be outdated, I don't think it should be changed just for one building. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Willis.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Julie Ranelli. I'm the branch manager at the Kent Island Library. And as a librarian, I deal in stories, but today I wanted to share a few numbers with you. In fiscal year 19, we saw over 155,000 visitors to our library through our meeting room doors and our library doors. Currently, we have 71 parking spaces for a meeting room that holds 122 people. And at times of peak usage, the parking lot is full to the point of being dangerous. That's particularly true during early voting when the Board of Elections uses our space for upwards of 2 weeks. And at times when we're doing wonderful things for children's programming, one that's very popular is Reptile Wonders. We fill the parking lot and then we're parking on the grass. We're asking the schools or Ram's Head to assist us with parking. And so we want to be sure that as we are adding space, that we're also meeting the parking needs, because the parking lot is not something I ever want to have to be worried about. We are proposing 121 parking spaces because we will still have this meeting room that seats 122, but we will be adding an additional meeting room that holds approximately 250 people. So we just want to be mindful of the actual usage needs as we go forward, and we do not want to have safety concerns for the people who are trying to access our building. So I thank you for your consideration and your time.
Thank you. Public comment. Oh, I was going to close it.
Jody
Please.
Schultz, Chester. I don't have a horse in the race at all. I just have a comment that I think if myself or another local developer had proposed something that looked like that in town center, I'm not sure we'd even make it to the planning commission with that look. I think you could do a lot better with the way this looks and ties into our community. I mean, we're all for the library, but I think, making that look like everything else is you require to look like the area probably needs a little bit more scrutiny than that. And that doesn't mean I'm not for the library. We're all for that, but I think it needs to fall in line with how you make everything else kind of look in the area. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, I'm Pat Rockwell. I grew up on Kent Island.
You speak up, please.
Pat Rockwell. I used to live on Kent Island. I live in Churchill now. Just wanted to speak and kind of add on to Mr. Willis and Mr. Schultz and Ms. Tolliver. I'm fine with expanding the library. I think that's a great idea. The flat roof next to the peak roof, I would rather see the peak roof continue. And I don't know, I'm not into the budget and stuff, but the cementatious board that they're speaking of, I mean, to be able to put a brick fascia on the front, I'd like to see, maybe what the numbers are, if it would benefit it more, putting the brick fascia on it and continuing the brick look. Maybe help out with the budget a little bit. So that's all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? This time we will close public comment. We'll bring it back to the commission. At this time, pardon me?
You want a motion?
So we have two items to resolve. Number one is the concept plan, and one is the shore buffer reduction. I don't know if we put the cart before the horse or the horse before the cart.
Shore buffer goes first.
Shore
because
buffer goes
without
first.
that reduction, the concept
Can't
plan
do the
fails.
concept. Okay, so with guidance from council, I will entertain a motion for the shore buffer reduction.
I didn't do it.
Resolved that the Planning Commission regarding the request by Queen Anne's County Commissioners to reduce the 300-foot shore buffer on parcel 321 to 100 feet under section 18-1-67 subsection B3 and as more particularly described in Planning and Zoning File SP 19-09-0036-C hereby finds the proposal is entirely within a growth area as identified by a 2010 comprehensive plan and Chesterville-Stevensville Community Plan. 2, the SC permits expansion of institutional uses. 3, more than 50% of the site is within the 300-foot buffer. 4, the reduction in the buffer is to allow for reasonable use of the site while protecting the majority of the buffer, and hereby grants the requested reduction.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? So I'll just share my thoughts. I have concerns with the buffer reduction and the fact that the paving constraints or increased paving, the plans that were presented before us showed things in non-tidal wetlands. So not that they were misrepresented, but we didn't have a true concept of what exists. I support the library in everything it needs to do. We've also heard testimony that the Coxnet Creek, the headwaters, by land, have created more problems for us, and yet we intend to provide additional paving. In my opinion, I don't think that we've provided enough thought towards pervious paving, and we're just trying to be impervious, which is not the goal and objective. I think that maybe with some additional thought and design, we can address some of those as we reduce the shore buffer to make things more amenable for all parties involved. So that's my discussion. Any other comment? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Aye. So that's 5 to...
Who's in favor?
Everyone.
Everyone in favor, except for me. So, all right. Move on to the concept plan.
Resolved that the Planning Commission regarding the request by Queen Anne's County Commissioners for accept concept plan approval for an addition and additional parking to the existing Kent Island Library, as more particularly described in the Department of Planning and Zoning file SP 19-09-0036-C, hereby finds: 1, the concept plan is consistent with the 2010 comprehensive plan and the 2007 Chester Stevensville Community Plan. And 2, do you want to modify that with your concerns?
That's just your motion.
It's your motion.
Amend it.
Okay,
I can
so
amend
I suggest then that we add another amendment that has to do with trying to increase the pervious parking within the critical area.
I think the guidance has been given.
Well, I
If
think
you
we
want
need-
to
we
include it
need
in the motion, that would be fine, but I think we hear the guidance, and we will certainly work to work that into the concept as it moves forward.
I would like, yeah, I think we need to address several issues here, really. I'm kind of between the devil and the deep blue sea here. I'm in favor of it. I like the concept, like the building, actually, but I also appreciate the concerns that other people have, and that probably need to be addressed engineering-wise, and so how do we address that, council? If we approve it,
I don't know what the next section says that you haven't read yet. That's what prompted
No,
this
I'm
discussion.
saving them at the end.
He's adding.
I'm adding it at the very end.
This is just
Second-
concept.
This is just concept.
Well, I think it's a legitimate concern, because by the time this comes back around for site plan approval, some, all, or none of you may be
too-
members
it's
of
too
the
late.
planning commission, and and without identifying your concerns at the concept plan level, future members of this planning commission may not have the institutional history regarding it. So I think it's appropriate to put it in. It also is a fair warning to the applicant.
So can we just add it as, and hereby grants concept plan approval with the following recommendations, and then consider ways to reduce impervious surface, consider ways to improve stormwater management to result in improved water quality,
Impacts to the floodplain.
and consider design alterations that will be more harmonious with the existing structure and the style of the region. Something to that effect. I mean, that's David's motion, but.
I like to adopt just what you said. Can you repeat it?
Yeah. I think-
Never, but it's all
Ms.
on
Brinson, you
tape.
got all those, didn't you?
so let me just clarify one thing. If we approve this, based on the amendment or the addition Ms. Tolliver just stated, the next time they come before us will be for site plan approval, is this correct?
Yes.
So those changes would be made,
The recommendations.
the recommendations.
And then assuming, for example, that none of the recommendations are incorporated in a final site plan, the applicant will have to explain why and justify why those recommendations were not followed. And they may be successful. I would caution you that, as I mentioned before, there are no design guidelines for the structure applicable in the SE district. So,
Understand.
in
That's
other words,
clear-
I'm not sure
clarified.
you could say no to a site plan approval on the basis of dissatisfaction with the architecture. Though we hope the applicant certainly understands that what we've said today.
We've gone to court for less, right? We've gone to court for less.
I will second David's motion.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? So I will say, Ms. Salazar, Mr. Edgar, Mr. Calhoun, since DPW is assuming some kind of construction management role, it appears, I hope that you speak to your architect and encourage him to listen to our recommendations and incorporate. We know that the county is strong advocates to keep our waters clean. Parking, buffers, things of those nature are very important to us, as are, native grasses and things of that nature, which weren't really part of this concept in which you brought us. We hope that you can grow and improve upon that for the site plan approval. No other discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say aye. Aye. 5-1. Thank you very much.
We've had that break, Mr.
Yes.
Chairman, before the
So
football season.
we would like to take a
That's-
5-minute break so we can refresh our coffee, please. So we will resume at 11:04.